So Shinjin, it's hard to really understand artificial intelligence before understanding intelligence, and intelligence is based on our brain and nervous system, neuroscience.
Indeed. This is like a picture of our brain, right?
Yeah, it is a picture of the brain. So what is artificial intelligence inspired by? I said human intelligence, and we have to understand the history as well. Aristotle thought the human intelligence resided in the heart, and it was another person, Galen, and someone called Alcmaeon, who said, no, it's actually in the brain.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. But it's actually not just the Greeks. I mean, philosophers in Egypt, China, India, Greece, Persia, they're all sort of thinking about what is intelligence, and all these fields were merged together. Was it psychology? Was it consciousness? Was it intelligence, will, reality? What's not? Even religion, they were all sort of, intertwined because the separation hadn't occurred yet. So the human body is a good way to understand how the nervous system works. We have our brain, which is a really thick cluster of neurons, and then you have the spinal cord, and then you have the peripheral nervous system, which is all the stuff that goes into your arms and legs, which is away from the spinal cord. And there are actually two nervous systems people may not know. One is the somatic nervous system. This is the thing with which you can feel and control your muscles and so on. And then you have the autonomic nervous system.
Is the somatic more conscious and the automatic more unconscious?
Yeah, so autonomic is more like your heart and your lungs. You don't think about it, it just keeps it going, right? It doesn't trust you to think about it. It's just doing it in the background. So it's
luckily it works.
And it works, thank God. So neuroscience as a field was born actually based on a couple of really incredible breakthroughs. One was a staining technology, staining approach, where you can take, this is called the Purkinje cell. It's a very complex neuron actually.
Wow.
This gentleman, Golgi, figured out how to stain it and look at it under the microscope, and then Ramon y Cajal, both of them won the Nobel Prize, then proposed the neuron as a cell that composes of our nervous system.
And is this a kind of a snapshot of a neuron in our brain?
Yeah, there's a Purkinje cell, so it goes beyond, a lot of animals have it, but it's a particular type of neuron. It looks like a tree actually. So the nervous system, as we said, is made up of neurons, and the cell looks like this. So the cell consists of a nucleus, which is this, and around the nucleus you have these hairs, dendrites. Then you have a long body, it's called the axon. And then at the bottom you have more dendrites, they're called telodendria. And then that connects to the next neuron. We'll see more of that in a minute. That connection is actually through a little gap. The cells are actually separate, the little gaps there. And those gaps are called synapses. And what you're seeing there is something called vesicles from which neurotransmitters are dropped. So the human brain is very interesting. The human brain is 86 billion neurons. They thought it was 100 billion, but there was a very interesting research paper that said, no, it's about 86 billion. And a human child is born with about 1 trillion synapses. Not just the neurons, it's how they connect.
Right, the synapses are connections between the neurons.
Yeah.
So a child, I guess you're saying it has a quadrillion connections?
Yeah.
And is that why a child's mind is always tuned on learning?
Yeah, so a child is a learning machine, right? And a child is basically pruning actually and saying this works, this doesn't, etc. And also growing new synapses. So that pruning and growing is how, as we become adults, the number of synapses actually goes down, becomes more refined, becomes more discerning. And remember, every synapse connection between two neurons, it's through these neurotransmitters that are dumped from the dendrite of one neuron to the other. That learning process can take a long time, and it's the interconnections that make the learning happen, which presages what we're going to talk about in AI. By the way, for cat lovers out there, I'm sorry to say that cats have about half as many neurons as dogs.
Maybe that's why dogs are smarter than cats.
Oh, I don't know about that. I won't go that far. And so neural network is essentially a bunch of neurons. That's the nucleus up there. You can see the long body and the dendrites, and you can see dendrites sticking out of the nucleus itself. And they come together. The axons can be really long. That's the point. And they create a network that's a natural neural network. This is what constitutes the brain. The brain is just a very dense set of neurons, but neurons are specialized to go throughout the body and have different purposes. You also have sensor neurons that can feel temperature, pressure. It's fascinating.
Indeed, it's amazing.
And those connections are called the white matter. So the gray matter in your brain, if you've heard the term, is the neurons, and the white matter is those connections, those axons. And this is a tensor diffusion image of neurons. You can see all the connections, how they're sort of organized.
Probably they are both important, right? The gray matter and the white matter.
Yeah. So the gray matter is the actual neuron.
Yep.
And by the way, signals travel down the axon at between 1 and 100 meters a second, zip down.
Really fast.
Yeah, really fast. And the axon through which the signals travel, they connect, and that's where the learning occurs, where the connections are. So learning is a matter of the connections. And artificial intelligence is a form of what we call biomimicry, which is we're going to take a neuron and mimic it. That's precisely how artificial intelligence was born, artificial human intelligence. So the idea was you take a neuron and you replicate it as a artificial copy. And that seems familiar to you, right?
Yeah, so we are taking the neurons and representing them as computer nodes,
Exactly.
and taking the axons, which are the connections, and representing them as weights.
That's right.
Signifying the strengths of the
Well,
connection.
actually, the synapses more than the axon.
Oh, the synapses.
The synapses
That's
become
right.
the weights and the connections.
Got it.
Right? Now, if you take that neuron, remember it's a network.
Yep.
So the equivalent in a computer is, in fact, a neural network.
Indeed, and we will learn more about it soon.